There's a lot of fetishization, fetishizing. I can't say
Something
it.
that's cool now is that studios can kind of do a double whammy where they initially commission the trash TV show adaptation of the real life event, but then they commission a documentary series that's like a little bit classier. As long as you do it that way, it's impossible for people to be mad at you.
The attic gimmick has been a thing for a while. I didn't do it for this video. It's not because of the
I'll take the glasses off. I'm going to put the glasses back on.
So a few months back, I did a couple of videos talking about the Netflix series Dahmer, criticizing elements of it that I thought were kind of unethical, the lack of care and consideration for Dahmer's victims and the families of those victims.
Recreating my cousin having an emotional breakdown in court in the face of the man who tortured and murdered her brother is wild.
This is how you act when you are out of control. Jeffrey, I hate you!
The kind of voyeuristic, fetishistic depiction of Dahmer.
Fetishization.
And how the Netflix series did essentially turn him into a kind of Halloween-esque cultural icon, which is what happened, in a way that you kind of wouldn't want a infamous, horrific mass murderer to be. Dahmer became a popular Halloween costume. And specifically how Netflix as a corporation was using this as an opportunity to kind of have their cake and eat it too, by making this series that's like, monster, or why Dahmer is a bad guy. How this is actually all about exposing racial prejudice and how it's got a very positive message behind it. Despite all of these surrounding elements, how actually the series was a kind of positive thing. This kind of corporate doublespeak of simultaneously profiting off of this horrific thing in a fairly unethical way, while at the same time positioning yourselves as standing up for some kind of justice. How this is actually about, awareness. So Netflix has now produced an episode of Black Mirror criticizing Netflix. We truly do live in a dystopia. In 2011, the UK's Channel 4 broadcast the first season of Black Mirror, helmed and written mostly by comedy writer Charlie Brooker, at that point known mainly for his self-hosted TV meta-commentary shows Screenwipe and Newswire.
Seagull has no idea that it's part of history, does it?
Yeah, that's how seagulls work, mate.
You've probably seen some clips, or you've seen that transition effect that tons of YouTube channels, including my own, just took from the shows. Black Mirror took obvious cues from The Twilight Zone and similar classic British shows like Hammer House of Horror and Tales of the Unexpected, with each episode being a standalone what-if horror story usually focused around some issue related to technology and society. One episode was about a future where people stored and replayed memories to a sometimes obsessive degree. One episode was about competing in singing contests to escape indentured servitude, and hey, I forgot Daniel Kaluuya was in this. And then, following the show's Season 2 finale and Christmas special, Black Mirror was picked up by Netflix. In a show about society's messy conflict with new technology and ethical boundaries, by Season 6, Netflix became one of the main subjects of the series, including Season 6, Episode 2, Loch Henry. So basically, Loch Henry starts with these two students coming up from London to a small town in Scotland. On the one hand, it's a guy introducing his girlfriend to his mum, and on the other hand, they're producing a documentary in the area. They want to make a documentary about a man stopping bird eggs from being stolen.
This is going to be a story about one of the last remaining holdouts against the commodification of nature.
Not about a man who watches eggs.
Well, yeah.
It's a kind of allegorical story about a battle of nature against society. Though they are then sidetracked on the realization that maybe if they wanted to sort of catch the attention of festivals and streaming services and things like that, maybe rather than making a documentary about bird eggs, they could instead make a documentary about the infamous serial killer who also lived in the town.
It's building up to that.
I haven't got your storytelling instincts. You tell it.
That maybe this would generate more interest, especially if they could find a suitable hook. So you have the dad of a bartender who's like close childhood friends with one of the documentarians, objecting to the documentary.
Shouldn't they be making movies about it? Fuck me, movies. Christ.
Not wanting to see it made. You know, someone who was close to all of this as it was happening, and at first it seems to be that that is his objection. That this is a kind of callous treatment of this tragic circumstance, and as such, completely shrugged off by the crew, who are delighted to just have such a spicy topic to dive into, jumpstart their careers, get some tourism going in the town, totally numbed to the horrific reality of this event.
In the dungeon.
He'll have you weeping on your knees.
In the dungeon.
He'll break your elbows with a rock.
In the dungeon.
Until, as it turns out, it hits quite close to home. I think it's kind of the cheesy part of the episode that it turns out that actually it's the guy's mum who was in fact involved in the crimes.
Can you imagine?
But this is kind of the point. This documentarian, while initially uncomfortable with the idea of kind of exploiting this tragic thing, very quickly is eased into it on realizing the sheer opportunity being laid at his feet. Except when he realizes it's his own family that's involved, when he realizes that he in his own way is a direct victim of these events, starts to become pretty uncomfy with it. The documentary is obviously still made. It obviously is still popular. The serial killer masks become a Halloween costume thing. The town becomes an event. Serial killer tourism is booming. It's all great, except for the guy who has now heard this horrific thing about his mum and is now just caught in a media cycle. Endless publicity, endless attention, while he is still struggling to process this thing that has happened.
There's a bit of an artistic veneer. There's a bigger artistic veneer that goes on now, I think, in true crime documentary making, where they look like Scandinavian art house movies. It makes you feel like you're really settling down to watch something very important. And that helps take away from the slightly more gross rubbernecker sort of Morbius fascination angle. Makes them feel more prestige. They are more prestige. So I don't know why. I don't know that there's anything that's changed in us as a people. I think that the treatment, the way these things are made has changed slightly.
I'm going to be honest that I have not been keeping up with Black Mirror in a while. I kind of trailed off around season 4 and have not really seen any of the episodes of season 5. I decided on a whim to watch the 6th series, and it seems like there is a pattern of episodes in which Netflix is being kind of self-aware about their own cultural impact, very much in that corporate way, having their cake and eating it too. Acknowledging the ways that people have criticized the way that Netflix handles art, the kind of algorithmic system that they work off of, the kind of callous, voyeuristic culture that they have very directly propped up with the way that they handle content and production. And now, very directly, with Loch Henry, the 2nd episode of season 6. People have criticized Black Mirror for getting a little bit like, what if phones but too much
They call it a smartphone, but they should call it they should call it a stew.
Like, I would say an episode like Playtest would be a good example, where it's like, oh, what if the virtual reality, you were in virtual reality, but then the virtual reality killed you. It did kind of feel like over time the show became less focused on having specific pointed messages about the way that society uses technology, more into kind of just shock value.
Fuck the polar bear.
Funnily enough, almost as if an algorithm was picking out like trending technological issues and like producing episodes of a show based on that. And I did honestly kind of feel that way about episode 1 of season 6, Joan is Awful. I'm still not entirely sure what the point was.
Merry Christmas, one and all!
But I certainly know that they had a lot to say about algorithms and AI and voyeurism and mental health issues and celebrity culture and media, and had many things to talk about.
Which really drives engagement.
Episode 2, though, very direct.
You're on Netflix.
Yep. Am I biting the hand that feeds?
Yeah.
I think it's more a gentle, playful nibble.
It's not gentle.
And this is the thing. Like, I think that the episode in itself is pretty good. Like, it's a little bit cheesy.
Years since I was in front of any kind of camera at all.
It's a little bit maybe shallow, but I agree with the point that it's making about the exploitation of these tragedies.
Although actually, in retrospect, it is a little bit strange to have this whole episode that's about lack of respect and consideration for victims of tragedies and families of victims of tragedies, and then have the whole twist be that the victims and the families of those victims took part in the crimes. I get that they're making a whole point about comeuppance and about how this guy is kind of exploiting this thing until it turns out to be a lot closer to home, but it's still there. Also, the way the girlfriend dies is kind of silly. Maybe I don't love the episode.
And that's the dystopian element of it, is because this is something that is being produced by Netflix, the company that was being criticized for doing this and are still doing it. There is going to be a second season of the fucking Dahmer show. I don't know if they've said who the serial killer is that they're going to do. I'm going to guess right now, Elliot Rogers. Maybe they're going to switch gears into like a school shooter. I'm trying to think of what would be the most like terrible choice that they could make, and I'm going to say like one of the school shooters would be the one. If you just want to maximize the trending topic, if you want to kind of just maximize the publicity, if you want to really exploit that algorithm, that's probably the one that I would go with. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, Netflix. People were criticizing the One Piece live-action remake, and I thought maybe they were being a little unfair.
I'm sensing a little bit of tension amongst the crew.
And then you go and do something like this. I guess as the power of these companies grows, this is kind of the inevitability that they're just going to be perpetually having their cake and eating it too. I think to some extent, I can blame the monopolization of these industries, the lack of real competition, which means that with the increasing size of these giant conglomerates, we are going to run into this thing where corporations are just constantly doing the bad thing and then making media about why the thing is bad. Kind of always how things have been, but even more kind of stomach churning because it's just so in your face at this point. At the same time, I don't know if free market competition was ever going to produce ethics. Mostly, I just have to kind of impotently yell from my attic at this and just admire the chutzpah of it. To so patently do the exact thing that people predicted you were going to do. To produce content criticizing the exact things that you are doing. To make a piece of media about how we really should have more care for the victims and their families and the people that are affected by these things, while continuing to have no respect for any of Dahmer's victims. The same way that I imagine Netflix will have very little consideration or care for the families of the victims of whoever the next series of that show is going to be about.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that announcement, but now with the actual context of who the next season's going to be about, I guess that's one way to sidestep the criticism about respecting the families of victims. You fucking scumbags.
I do still acknowledge the criticism that on some level I'm doing a similar thing because I'm talking about the thing and it's going to end up, having ads attached to it. I just feel like we're kind of trapped in an inescapable hell.
I have to ask about Streamberry. So you're parodying Netflix while being on Netflix. Was that a delicate situation to tackle and was anything off limits?
Nothing was off limits, I think. Well, I mean, I don't know.
What could we have
Turned
asked?
out nothing that we did was off limits.
I don't know. I think you wish that they had pushed back a little more.
They agreed really quickly. It would have been great to sort of appear like real rebels and sort of... They didn't want us to do it, and we did it anyway because we're so cool. But that's not what happened, though. We asked them and they went, yeah, that sounds great.
He has a real sense of humor.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You can criticise Loch Henry from two main angles. You can criticise it for the content itself. Again, there is something fairly uncomfortable about an episode that is unquestionably about the emotional experience of family members exploited by media in the wake of tragedy, where the twist is the family members were involved. An accusation that is already frequently thrown at victims when they find themselves in a paparazzi media cycle. You could say it feels lopsided that, to build up the end of episode twist, what should be the focus of the episode and the main character's attempt to navigate this tragedy within that media cycle is basically left to a footnote and a few lingering shots. This is a criticism of execution, which I really wish was not the proper term in this context. Or you could criticize it on the premise itself. The fact that this is an episode talking about a culture of glammed up, rubbernecking, gruesome, real-life tragedy content funded by and profiting large corporations who care less about ethics and more about pleasing an audience engagement algorithm that is in fact funded by and profiting a large corporation that is that. Even worse, in its mere existence, it provides cover for Netflix in yet again allowing them the soft PR of listening to criticism, or at least being open to it, while also allowing them to separate themselves from it. Get it? Get it? Because it's not Netflix, it's Streamberry. Isn't it great when bad corporations co-opt their own criticism as parody?
I'm Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire tyrant, and this is my skybar. Silence! Seize them!
Should an episode like Loch Henry exist? I don't see why not. It is calling out an exploitative culture without itself exploiting any specific real-world tragedies, and there's even some advantage in doing this on a platform with an audience that is geared towards that type of content. This episode very well might get audiences to reconsider their relationship to that type of content. That's a good thing. That's the same thing I was trying to do with my own videos, which incidentally are hosted on YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is not a great company. Netflix is an unethical, greedy corporation, but like I've already said, this is not a one company problem. As far as I can sum up, it seems like the problem is media companies that prioritize profit over ethical considerations, with heavy use of AI-driven algorithms to dictate what will generate that profit, which is what pretty much every large media company does. Disney did the same thing at the same time, and I also made a video about that. The trouble is when I say prioritize profit, I'm also well aware that I'm not just talking about tricking or manipulating people. When it comes to profit, it is unavoidable that this profit is also in some ways the result of what engages and interests people.
The mystery is, how could someone do that shit? It's what the fuck. It's give me the details, and the details are so awful, it is irresistible.
It's when something happens, I do get a little bit hyperfixated on, I've got to know everything, and I am a bit weird, like, I can be a bit weird. And it's not because you're glorifying or glamorising the hideousness of serial killers, whatever. It's just because it's just so outside of your mundane lives.
There is a difficult element to it because obviously it's not like Netflix, and people do make this mistake. They act as if these kinds of services invented the idea of people getting really into serial killers and true crime and things like that. They're reacting to something. Netflix is reacting to what is content that people will see and then instantly click on.
You've only got to go back to, like, Jack the Ripper, yeah? People still read about him. People still talked about him. He was of his time. Oh, Jack the Ripper. Oh, someone's murdering prostitutes in London. Do you know what I mean? And so there's always been that. There has always been that, even before Netflix.
I am also interested and engaged in this type of content. Brooker has admitted he is also interested and engaged in this type of content, and in talking around this issue with Loch Henry, I don't think he has a great answer to this either. I cannot get around the fact that true crime and scandal is popular not because people have been tricked into thinking it's the most ethical product, it's because it is what draws their attention. I'm definitely aware of this as someone who makes videos on a site that is increasingly fueled by online drama content and feels constantly reminded by how much more engagement I'd be getting if I made that the focus of my channel. So if the problem is this obvious disconnect between profit under capitalism and ethics, which is also an obvious disconnect between human interest and ethics, here's basically my take. Your individual consumption is not the issue, and it's also not the solution. You can't always help what you are drawn to in media, and you are not the cause of the problem for receiving the thing that was given to you. Neither are you going to change a wide-scale systemic reality with a personal decision, the same as trying to solve climate change by recycling. This doesn't get solved by us chastising people for watching true crime or Dahmer or shaming Charlie Brooker for helping produce something that is basically trying to put a spotlight on this issue. We should always try to be ethical consumers, but power through consumption is just restating the same problem. Because under our current capitalist system, where corporations hold significant influence with very little regulation, power is profit, and profit isn't ethics. I wonder what part of that equation needs to change if we want a more ethical world. I wrote that part, which means that I'm being very serious right now. I forgive you, Charlie Brooker, and I am available for hire. I got a haircut between filming this, but please don't comment on that. In a lot of ways, it was inevitable that Black Mirror was going to end up in this kind of position, and I think Charlie Brooker was always aware of that. The episode I mentioned before, 15 Million Merits, isn't just about a singing contest. Mainly, it's about the main character struggling against this system that he recognizes is exploitative, but that he is unable to escape from. And in the end, he protests that system the only way he feels he can. He manages to get a spotlight for himself, he puts a shard of glass to his own throat, and then loudly criticizes it to the largest audience he can.
But oozing around it and crushing it into a bone, into a joke. One more ugly joke in the kingdom of millions, and then fuck you. Fuck you for happening.
And the system loves it.
The most heartfelt thing I've seen on this stage since Hot Shot began.
It's scandal and drama and more attention for them. People are rallying around this thing and it's on their platform. And in the end, this guy ends up with his own show. He ends up with a lavish lifestyle. And every day he gets to do a new episode where he talks about how terrible and exploitative this system is.
Farewell forever. To the same time next week.
And every day he is rewarded for it. Black Mirror was always, one way or another, consumer entertainment, and this consumption was never going to be revolutionary because there is no revolutionary consumption. To borrow from some other often oversighted dystopian social commentary, if there's a Big Brother, Big Brother's talking about how much they hate Big Brother. Anyway, I've now done 100 videos on this channel, and now I'm working on some dystopian social commentary, and you'll find out more about that soon.
I got so overly excited about the Black Mirror that I actually watched 3 more episodes last night without you.
What's your review of the other ones?
I'm so sorry.